In one sentence, what is this race about?
It's about fundamentally changing who has power in this country and taking it back for everyday people.
That's succinct. Let's talk about the political environment. When we had the transition from Biden to Harris, you were immediately asked, do you endorse Kamala Harris? And you said, I'm focused on my own race right now. Some people interpreted that to mean he doesn't know if he supports Kamala Harris. He doesn't know if he wants to be tied to the Biden-Harris administration. There's a lot of speculation about anything other than yes was no. Explain what you meant then and how you feel now.
Yeah, I mean, I made it then and I feel it now. It's just, for me, you know, I'm not elected to any position, and I'm going all around the state asking people to vote for me. I don't think we're going to see a lot of play in the presidential ticket from either side of Missouri, and so it's just about, I think the top of the race, or the top of the ticket here in Missouri is my race, and it's going to be the constitutional amendment to, you know, codify abortion rights into the Missouri Constitution. And so for me, it's just getting people to vote for my race, introducing myself to everybody, and you know, I gotta say, like, I got my hands full with that as it is. So I'm gonna keep it at that and make sure that that's just what I'm working on.
Give me a Biden-Harris policy with which you disagree and why.
Well, you know, gosh, I think we could come up with a lot of things on either side that I disagree with. And so, you know, for me, I think one thing that we've really seen is corporations having too much influence in our politics. And so I think you see it on both sides, but my goal, my ultimate goal in this campaign and the way that I'm doing the campaign is to get corporate money out of politics. So again, you know, you asked what the number one thing for me in this election is. It's fundamentally changing who has power in this country, and I don't think anybody on any side should be taking money from corporate PACs. I don't think they should be taking money from federal lobbyists, big pharma executives, anybody like that. So, you know, in my race, I don't take money from them, and I really think that if we want everyday people to have power in this country again, that's the only way we're going to get there.
In your advertising, you have suggested that big corporations, the power structure in this country, has stripped small communities like Jefferson City for parts. What does that mean?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, there's 1,000 examples. I think one of the easiest ones I can give is big agriculture. You know, right now in Missouri, we used to have so many small hog farmers. This is a good example. Lots of small hog farmers, and we lost 90% of them in just one generation because massive companies like Smithfield and JBS, both foreign owned, by the way, Smithfield owned by China, JBS owned by Brazil, they bought off people in our state legislature on both sides of the aisle in order to make it so that they could have foreign ownership of land, so that they could violate the Packers and Stockyards Act, so they could use their monopoly positions to really just crush small farmers. And now what you're seeing is the wealth from all these communities all around our state, all the farmland, like, it gets sucked up and out of our state and it doesn't stay local. And so one of the big examples I would give is antitrust law. Like, these big companies, they just have too much power, man. And so while they're taking all the money out, our local farmers, you know, they used to keep the money in the communities, right? We would have a supply chain that was local. They'd buy their feed, their equipment locally, and we get to keep money that comes from our land here. And we don't get to do that anymore.
Let's talk about immigration. You have been quoted as wanting to recruit and welcome immigrants from all countries. Now, many people in both parties believe the Biden administration has made a mess of the southern border. Do you agree?
Oh, there's no doubt that there's a mess at the southern border. And so as a Marine, you know, I was a Marine for a long time, 13 years on active duty. Before I led a police training team in Iraq, I trained with our Border Patrol at the southern border. I was actually, you know, spent a lot of time down in Yuma. I was actually certified by the Border Patrol Tactical Unit. I know what I'm seeing down there right now. It's a problem. I also know that there are real solutions, and we're just not getting there. I mean, we need to stop the flow of fentanyl. We need to end catch and release programs, and we need to fully fund and equip Border Patrol. And the guy that I'm running against, he doesn't care about doing any of those things, right? He voted against fentanyl scanners, funding for fentanyl scanners. He voted against Roy Blunt's bill on the border that Donald Trump eventually signed into law, which would have fully funded Border Patrol. And then this year, you know, he voted against a bill to fund and equip Border Patrol that the Border Patrol guys I trained with actually endorsed. And so he doesn't want to actually solve the issue. He doesn't care if we're not safe. He just wants to make sure he's got that issue for himself in his campaign. And I think that's wrong, man.
I want to talk to you more about your military experience in a moment, but with regard to the war on drugs, you have characterized that in the past, I believe, as a waste of taxpayer money. How would you address the opioid crisis differently than it has been addressed?
Well, I think the war on drugs has been a war on people rather than a war on the actual drugs, right? I mean, you know, locking people up for smoking weed and things like that, I think that's wrong. And so, I mean, most of the fentanyl that comes through the southern border comes through ports of entry, comes through crossings, and if we have real fentanyl scanners and we fully fund and equip Border Patrol, we can actually do something about that and save a lot of lives here in Missouri. And as far as the opioid crisis, like, that was created by big pharma executives who are never going to get in any trouble for it. And it's, again, because we let these monopolists control our economy, they control the news, they control what people hear, they control doctors, and really just push pills on people that we didn't need and left us all unsafe.
One other domestic concern that your opponent is hitting you hard with in his advertising is transgender rights, how to treat people, whether schools should be involved. Says that you are advancing a far left-wing agenda on transgender rights that nobody in this country agrees with. What's your position on transgender rights?
Well, look, his attacks against me are ridiculous. I mean, again, his one on the border, absolutely ridiculous. Like, he's the only guy who's not securing the border between the two of us. I train with the Border Patrol. You know, he talks about crazy stuff like me going to take away everybody's pickup truck keys, and then this transgender stuff. Like, he is lying, he's making stuff up, he's doing false attack ads, he's refusing to debate. You know, I've accepted 5 televised debates. We talked about this the other day. Like, he hasn't done a single one because he wants to distract everybody from his record, right? And because he doesn't want people to realize that, like, you got a real Missouri guy right here, right? Like, I grew up paycheck to paycheck. My family went bankrupt from medical bills right here in mid-Missouri. And when we got saved by our community, who passed the plate down at church for us, brought more food by the house than we could eat, and just really took care of us. I mean, that's Missouri, man. You know that, right?
But let me get you back.
That's the strength. Well, what I'm going to say
question
is, like, he's trying to come up with false attacks because he wants to distract from who I really am and what he's done in office. He doesn't want to talk about either one of those things.
Let's talk foreign policy. Many in your party see continued support for Israel as an endorsement of a Netanyahu philosophy that you just react incendiarily to anything that happens against the Jewish people and against Israel. And many want this country to not, first of all, give them weapons and to do more for people who are living in Gaza, who are the real victims of what is going on over there. How do you walk that line between support for Israel, which I assume you continue to show, and taking care of what's going on in Gaza?
Well, I'm not sure about that characterization of everything, so I'm just going to talk about how I see it personally, because that's what, you know, I want to present to the people who are making a decision in this election. And so for me, it's just, you know, what happened on October 7th was an absolute tragedy, right? Like, kids in a music festival, many civilians being taken, tortured, abused, and I believe Israel had a right to defend itself. And I think they had a right to defend themselves militarily. You know, when I worked on the Joint Staff, I did counter-proliferation for weapons of mass destruction for a while. And I can tell you right now, Israel's our only ally in that region. They're the ones who helped us with counter-proliferation. They do so many good things that nobody talks about, right? And I believe they have a right to defend themselves. And I think what we've seen since then is, you know, we've seen some of the lessons that we learned in Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, I deployed to Iraq, I deployed to Afghanistan twice. And just having a whole bunch of civilians die and innocent people, it doesn't ultimately bring about peace, right? I mean, look what happened in Afghanistan. 20 years later, Taliban's in control, right? In Iraq, we're still dealing with ISIS. And so I do think we need to get to a negotiated ceasefire that absolutely brings back the hostages.
But in the meantime, keep giving Israel weapons?
Well, for people who talk about, like, getting rid of things like the Iron Dome, like, that's madness, right? Like, these are civilians in Israel who are being attacked by rockets all the time. It's completely unfair to try to take away things like that. And plus, it's, you know, I learned when I was negotiating with Russia, and just from a military perspective, like, if you take away things like the Iron Dome or weapons, like, what you're going to end up with is a broader regional war, because those rockets are going to keep coming, right? And if they're not getting knocked down out of the sky, then Israel's going to go into its neighbors to protect themselves, which they would have a right to do, I think. So.
You have come back several times to your military experience on various questions I've already asked, so let's talk about that. Your ads highlight it, hit it hard, refer to you as Lieutenant Colonel. Are you sending a message that because Josh Hawley never wore the uniform, that his positions on military service, such as women in combat, are invalid, or that perhaps even he forfeits the right to be a senator because he didn't wear the uniform?
I think Josh Hawley doesn't understand a lot of things. He doesn't understand how everyday people in the state grow up. You know, I understand that, going bankrupt from medical bills, seeing the strength in our communities. I don't think he understands real service. I don't think he understands the military. You know, he got booted from the Senate Armed Services Committee by his own party for holding up important nominees and things like that. Like, the guy is not good for our national security. If he were, he would have voted for Roy Blunt's border bill, right? He would have done a lot of things differently. He just doesn't get it. And so for me, I'm highlighting my military experience because it shows two things. A real record of service. You know, when I got done with school, I joined the United States Marine Corps because when I was a kid, you know, one of the guys who really took care of us, his name was Al, he would take me down to Apache Flats, the Marine Corps League there, and you know, the guys there were my heroes. They took care of their community no matter what, with no expectation of glory, pride, nothing like that. I wanted to be like them. And so, you know, I've got a real record of service. When Josh Hawley got out of school, he went and worked for DC's biggest lobbying law firm. Like, there's a pretty big difference there, and I want to be able to highlight that. I spent 13 years on active duty. I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, I held high positions in the Pentagon, and for me, like, that's real, true service that I'm proud of. And I think the people of Missouri are proud of that type of service too, and that's the type of person they want in the U.S. Congress.
Mr. Kunce, Colonel Kunce, thank you for your time.
No, thanks for having me, Kermit.